I'm pleased to get an opportunity to speak on this issue, and there are a lot of different topics I'm going to try to cover. The first thing I'd like to welcome is that finally the system has been told that their option, and that includes the universities pushing this hard, that the loan option is not on the table. I remember in the noughties when I was in Cabinet one summer, it's a good time to try to put a memo through. There was a memo circulated, but I was away as it happened, and I sat down and I sent back a very strong note saying that, having read the documentation, I was totally opposed to the loan option. It's hard enough for young people when they leave college to buy and insure a car and then try to get accommodation and then to try to buy accommodation without having been saddled with the cost of education on top of that. And I welcome that decision. I welcome that there's to be more investment, but I think we have to put it into context. Because the grant rates today are way beneath what they were, way beneath. For example, the adjacent rate in 2022 will be €1,415, and the non-adjacent rate will be €3,225. In 2008, the same rates. The adjacent rate was 1,370, which is slightly, very, very, ever so slightly smaller, €45 smaller. And the non-adjacent rate was 3,420, which is larger. So in fact, give or take, we're standstill in the new rates to 2008, but there's been a lot of inflation since then, and particularly in the last year. The special rate in 2022 is going to be 2,575, and the non-adjacent special rate will be 6,115. And similarly, you get the same pattern. In 2008, the adjacent rate was 2,680, which was greater than it's going to be next autumn, and the non-adjacent rate was 6,690, which was €475 higher. So we're only catching up. So the idea that we're actually improving things is not true. And then we come to the maddest decision. I could never understand this. We're always boasting that higher education, in other words, postgraduate education is so vital in this country. In 2022, the adjacent rate's 2,575. In 2021, I mean, the postgraduate rate is 3,500. It's a good rise in the 2000. But in 2008 to 2010, it was 6,270. And quite rightly so. Because, when you've got your degree, in the old days, you'd have gone working after you got your degree, and very, very few people would have gone on to fourth level education. But now it's very, very common. But people want to have an income at that stage. A lot of them are doing free tutorials and so on. So I think that, this decision that was taken back 10 years ago was a bad decision. It was a decision that was never future-proofed. Again, the student contribution is now 3,000. It was 900 in 2008. So as I said, we need to look at this radically. I think the same pattern would be followed if you looked at the ceilings, the grant ceilings for eligibility, and that they haven't progressed according to inflation. Minister, on that one, can I make one simple suggestion? I think when you're assessing a parent's income, particularly in the circumstances that people face now, that mortgage or house rent costs should be deductible from the gross income. Because you could have two families that look the same, say 50 or 60,000 of an income, and one could have a very large mortgage, and you could put a ceiling on how much mortgage you discount, so you wouldn't have massive places. But the ordinary mortgage, where somebody might have, which would be common enough in certain circumstances, no mortgage. And there's a huge discrepancy between both. There's one way of helping us to solve the student accommodation crisis. And your colleague Éamon Ryan can do it in the flash of a pen. and that is to give much better radial services out of all the university and third level towns. And I'll just give an example of a simple step. Until 2 years ago, there was no bus leaving Galway that went beyond Knocknacarra after 6 o'clock in the evening. Now, unless student life has changed totally from the time I was in college, students didn't want to go home every night at 6 o'clock. I mean, they're entitled to a social life. Now, thankfully, in that case, we got 3 services up to 11 o'clock at night that are very well patronised. And what that means is that it is possible not to have to get accommodation in the city, and you bunk up the odd night you want to stay overnight, but you don't need 5 nights a week accommodation. But if the bus services and the public transport services aren't there, then you cannot do this. And I bet you, if you do a survey of all of the third level towns around the country, you will find a very, very bad patchy pattern of public bus services out of those towns, particularly in the late evening. And it'll be a quick win. We're all the time talking about sustainable travel, and of course it'll be very, very important that the reduced cost, the 50% reduction for students, would be maintained. An issue that concerns me hugely is access to third level education. We talk about reforming the Leaving Cert. That wouldn't be my concern. It's the CAO race. The one exam decides what you get into, whether you become a doctor or whatever, if that's what you choose to be. And that mitigates against people who do not have the resources. That whole system, and I'm not sure that it's getting us the best people into professions. I think there should be general courses for the first year in things like medicine and the high point subjects. And then after the first year, the picking would be done. I think it would be much more equitable and give many more people who do not access it. And we know, you do a map of third level access and you'll find all the so-called rapid areas we used to have as very low access. You'll find travellers as very low access, and we need to tackle that issue. Another issue that concerns me is the need to maintain standards. And I would accept that at a very high level of research, standards are high in this country. I am not so convinced that we're not slipping down at the level 8 in the general courses, and I think it's absolutely important that we maintain standards and that there's high rigid auditing. Other countries had a big dumbing down and it didn't do them an awful lot. And we boast about a good education, but remember, complacency is always a devil in situations like this. Can I move on to science investment? And again, Science Foundation Ireland was set up to do blue skies research. If we want to attract companies into this country, if we want to attract high-level, high-end research people into the country, you have to be willing to invest in the future. There was a big move in the early part of the last decade towards applied research, towards getting results, towards working on projects that would give you commercial results. I think we need to look at that again and make sure that this country is doing top-level blue skies research. It's a long-term investment. There's no immediate return. But remember, a lot of the things that we're talking about in the last few years emanated from blue skies research that was going on, that then over time became applied research. But if you're not doing the blue skies, you're not going to attract the top-end people. One thing that concerns me is about guidance, career guidance for young people. And unfortunately, it seems to me that academics seem to have a greater cachet than apprenticeships. And this is a major, major issue, and we're paying the price of giving that status. And I think we need to do something about that status difference. And I know work is going on, and there's much more prominence now for apprenticeships. But I think that we need to really focus our career guidance on the ability, the interest, and the natural direction that a student will go, and that we try to encourage them not to go for the status things. Now, my belief is that if you become, for example, let's take it, an industrial electrician, the skill level would match some people with a PhD in the modern electronics that they have to be able to deal with. So I think that we need to upsell these so that people realise that these are very, very valuable. An rud Jerry or no, now, an ceistadár de me go minic hannah. Tácht na jango chefagula, gutchi fríd, an dáil, agus an seanad, agus tá sin in glí an ish. Tá sé ráite go mai fiche fan géad gan seirbhís peible, arcathe, go chuoine a bheits cumas acu oibre tú chailgus triverla. A ní léir domsa go bhfuil éon phlean ag an arnal edachas trío level ag an cóirla ag an údras am ard edachas, nó ag do rion. Faoi cén chuí a churthar chuige le cinnte go maithne daoine ar fáil agus a láthar daoine ar fáil, leis na seirbhís seo chur ar fáil. Agus seo chuide go rud a hálinn sa stáid seo, dinta ciniste an seo, ag ní dhéanann an córas chur chuig go cóháite a chur le chéile le dionna cinnte go dionanta freastal bhíonta neireachtais agus bheadhsúlam go dúirí faoi sin láireach mar ní sé ach seaachmlíonna go le go dtí go mbeidh ag feiche tríocha an sprocháta agus níl bail ar bith i láthair na huaide go srisemuid an sproch sin mar an dhéanamid go níomh láireach gur maigad.